A radio is playing in a kitchen. 3 seconds of a song go by. In those 3 seconds, that radio said a number out loud. You did not hear it. You cannot. That is not a malfunction. It was engineered around the exact limits of your ears. Here is the arithmetic, because it is checkable. A published patent description of the system defines one complete message as a 32-bit packet. 16 bits naming the station, 16 bits carrying a timestamp. The message goes out 4 bits at a time, and each 4-bit symbol occupies 400 milliseconds of the audio. 32 divided by 4 is 8 symbols. 8 symbols at 400 milliseconds each is 3.2 seconds. So 3 seconds of a song is very close to one full sentence in a language your hearing was measured and then written out of. Nothing appears on the radio's display. The speaker does not announce it. The music keeps moving as if the signal is only music. I want to be careful about what that sentence says, because the interesting part is not the part most people assume. The code names the station. It does not name you. This is the measurement system used to estimate radio audiences, and it has been running in the open, inside public broadcast audio, since 2007. The odd part is not that a station can be identified. The odd part is that to hide the identification, engineers had to map human hearing closely enough to know exactly what you would never notice, and then broadcast into that gap. The device that listens is called a portable people meter, PPM. For most of its life, it looked like a pager, a small, matte black box, roughly the size of a phone, clipped to a belt or dropped into a bag. It does not need you to press anything. It does not need you to remember anything. It listens, passively, through the day, for codes that are already in the broadcast audio around it. The person carrying it belongs to a recruited panel. That is the sentence that matters, and I want to say it plainly before going any further. The meter is not hanging from every listener's belt. It goes to a sample that the measurement company recruits, and the person carrying it knows what the device is and agrees to carry it. So the honest version of this story is a smaller and stranger one. Your radio is labeled continuously, whether or not anyone is there to read the label. And a few tens of thousands of recruited people walk around the country carrying readers for it. Nielsen's own glossary defines the meter as an audience measurement system that tracks what consumers listen to on the radio. It works by detecting identification codes embedded in the audio portion of a broadcast. Nielsen's public description of the encoding method calls it critical band encoding technology, CBET, and describes CBET encoders as inserting a unique code into the audio programming of each media outlet at the time of broadcast. Each media outlet. That phrase is doing a great deal of work, and I will come back to it. The meter's advantage over the thing it replaced is that it does not depend on memory. The older method was a paper diary. A diary asks a person to write down what they think they listened to, and when, and for how long. People are bad at that. Not dishonest, just human. They round. They forget the car. They forget the store they were only in for 4 minutes. A meter does not ask. It records the coded audio it detects, timestamps it, and the log goes back at the end of the day. That change from asking a person to detecting a signal is the entire reason the code has to exist. If you are going to measure listening without a witness, the sound itself has to carry its own identification. The code begins at the radio station. In a 2008 technical briefing written for broadcast engineers, the National Association of Broadcasters described the payload directly. Station ID, program ID, and time tag information are inaudibly added to a radio station's audio signal in the encoder using Arbitron's patented critical band encoding technology. The same briefing describes the hardware in the least dramatic terms available. The encoder is 1 rack unit tall. It fits into a standard studio equipment rack. It becomes part of the audio air chain, which is the path a program follows before it reaches the transmitter. That is the piece I keep coming back to. The encoder is not a special attachment on a special station. In a metered market, an unencoded station is an invisible station. If the audio does not carry the code, the meter has nothing to detect, and the station does not appear in the book. Which is why, in the largest American radio markets, essentially every station you can tune to carries one, not a handful. The ones with the billboards, the morning shows, the traffic reports, every major market station carries one. So how do you put data into music without anyone hearing it? The useful word is masking. Human hearing is not a flat microphone. It divides sound into critical bands, and inside a band, a loud sound raises the threshold for everything near it. A quiet tone sitting next to a loud one does not sound quiet. It does not sound like anything at all. Your ear stops reporting it. The encoder exploits exactly that. It analyzes the program audio continuously and asks, band by band, how much energy the music is already putting here. Where the music is loud, the encoder can add a small amount of tone energy in that same band and stay underneath the threshold it just measured. This is the part I had backwards when I started reading. I assumed a hidden code would go where the music is not, into a quiet gap, an unused frequency, some empty shelf at the edge of the spectrum. It is the opposite. The code goes where the music is loudest. Loud content is not the obstacle the code has to survive. Loud content is the cover the code needs. The patent description is specific about the mechanism. The amplitude of each tone is controlled by the masking energy offered by the host audio in the set of frequency bands in which the tones reside. And the masking characteristics are recalculated frequently, at intervals as short as 2 milliseconds. So the code is not a fixed layer sitting under the song. It is a layer that reshapes itself hundreds of times a second to stay hidden inside whatever the song is doing. The tones themselves sit roughly between 1 and 3 kilohertz. That is not a fringe of the spectrum, that is the middle of speech, the region human hearing is most sensitive to. The code hides in your best frequencies, not your worst ones. Here is the demonstration in 3 layers. First, the tone alone, which you find immediately. Second, the music alone, which is ordinary. Third, both together at the levels an encoder would choose. The tone is still there, it is still measurable, you simply stop being able to locate it. And then the whole thing has to survive the trip. The encoder adds the code in the rack room, the transmitter carries it, the speaker in your kitchen turns it back into moving air. That air crosses a room, or a car cabin, or a store aisle, and picks up the dishwasher and the traffic and the conversation on the way. The meter's microphone gets whatever arrives. A detector then tries to pull a 32-bit message out of that. It does not always succeed cleanly, and the system is built on the assumption that it will not. Nielsen's public technical description says PPM devices transmit complete and partial codes back to Nielsen, with edit rules that use nearby complete codes to validate the missing pieces. The message repeats, so no single failed read decides anything. The right comparison is not a small voice under the song. It is a watermark on a photograph. You hold the photograph up, you see the whole scene normally, and the mark was in the image the entire time. And now the box itself is disappearing. Nielsen has decoupled the encoding algorithm from its own hardware and licensed it as software. On Nielsen's engineering portal, the audio software encoder is described as taking the PPM encoding algorithm out of the Nielsen hardware encoder it lives in today and making it available for integration into third-party broadcasting equipment, where it adds the enhanced CBET code to the audio stream, frees up rack space, and enables a move to cloud-based workflows. The certified vendor list includes Auburn, Telos, and Omnia, and Wheatstone. Those are the audio processors that were already in the rack. So the black box I have been describing is becoming a line of code inside a box that was already there. Trade coverage put it plainly. Stations no longer have to house and monitor a separate encoder to make sure their station is encoded. There is no longer a separate object to point a camera at. The meter system covers the 48 largest American radio metros, and the monthly meter books published in June of 2026 ran across that footprint. This is not a legacy system winding down, It is the current currency of a market where a rating point is worth real money. A rack room, a tower on a hill, a kitchen counter, a car, a device moving through somebody's ordinary day. The hardware on the person is changing too. In August of 2021, Nielsen announced what it calls PPM wearables and said it would begin placing about 3,000 of them in September of that year with a subset of its nearly 60,000 active United States panelists. The new forms come as wristbands, clips and pendants, which Nielsen said appeal to demographic groups that historically comply less well with a belt-worn pager. The pager shape was never the point. Detection was the point, and detection fits on a wrist. Nielsen has also discussed the obvious next step, using a phone instead of a dedicated device, while noting the cost of running watermark detection continuously against a phone battery. Then there is the counting rule, which is a smaller change that moved much bigger numbers. Nielsen's glossary defines CUME as the total number of different people who tuned to a station during a day part for at least 5 or more minutes in diary data or 3 or more minutes in PPM data. That 3-minute figure is new. Beginning in January 2025, a metered listener qualifies at 3 minutes, where 5 used to be required. A year later, Nielsen published what that did. In February of 2026, in a Radio Advertising Bureau webinar, Nielsen's John Miller reported that average audience across PPM markets was up 14%, comparing January through December of 2025 against the same months in 2024. Station-level daily CUME was up about 7%. Afternoon drive in the 25 to 54 demographic was up 15%. Nobody started listening 14% harder. Miller said as much, describing the change as capturing short-duration listening that competing systems were already crediting, and as modernizing the way radio listening is credited in PPM. He also warned stations not to expect the growth to repeat, because the comparison year now contains the new rule too. That is worth sitting with for a second. A definition changed inside the measurement system, and an entire industry's audience appeared to grow by double digits. The listening did not move. The counting rule moved. The message inside the music is not your name. It is a station identifier and a timestamp. The meter belongs to a person who was recruited, who was told what the device does, and who agreed to carry it. The code identifies the station, not the listener. I am saying that twice on purpose, because this story does not need to be bigger than it is. What it is a measurement system designed to be inaudible, running continuously in public broadcast audio across the largest markets in the country for most of 2 decades, in plain sight and fully documented. The eeriness lives in the blind spot itself. To hide a signal that reliably, somebody had to draw the boundary of human hearing accurately enough to work a few decibels on the wrong side of it, in the middle of the frequencies you care most about, in real time, against whatever song happened to be playing. That map exists. It is precise. It has been in commercial use since 2007, and it is now shipping as a software library inside processors that were already installed. The radio is still doing more than one job. It is playing the song. It is carrying the station's programming. And inside that same audio, about every 3.2 seconds, it is finishing another sentence that was never addressed to you. The next time one is on in the background, the sound in the room is doing 2 things at once. One layer is for you. The other is for a machine that was taught, very carefully, exactly what you will never notice.